Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and adopt House Concurrent Resolution 222 as amended.
Pursuant, the clerk will report the title.
House Concurrent Resolution 222, concurrent resolution supporting the goals and ideals of National Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Westmoreland, and the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Davis, each will control 20 minutes. Gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume, and I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days who will then wish to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material in the resolution under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, it is an enormous tragedy to lose the life of a child, and it is a sad statistic that each year approximately 1 million pregnancies in the United States end in miscarriage, stillbirth, or the death of a newborn baby. As this resolution states, even the shortest of lives are of great value, and the grief of the parents who lose their children cannot be underestimated. The governors of all 50 states have joined together in designating October the 15th, 2006 as Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day. And I hope all members will join me in supporting the goals and ideals of this day as well. And Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would yield myself such time as I might consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, when any baby or child dies, there is deep grief for the hopes, dreams, and wishes that will never be. Left behind are a sense of loss and a need for understanding. Every year, many lives are touched by miscarriage or the death of an infant or child. According to a 1996 study by the Center for Disease Control, 16% of the more than 6 million pregnancies that year ended in either a miscarriage or stillbirth, and 26,784 births ended in infant death. Pregnancy and Infant Loss Day, which will be held on October 15th, will assist in bringing the process of healing to families and will help to heal families who are coping with and recovering from a miscarriage, stillbirth, or the loss of an infant. Families will always struggle to cope with the devastating crisis of a miscarriage or loss of an infant or child. Parents often cry, feel ill, or depressed, or have other emotional responses for months or years after a death. The pain is a normal part of grieving. Parents often want to talk about their pain and are pleased when others take the time to listen. People who come into contact with the grieving family have a role in helping to resolve the family's grief. The role of each person will be determined by his or her relationship with the family and the family's stage of grief. As a community, we should remember that no one can take the pain away from a grieving family. We can, however, provide comfort, sympathy, and understanding. There will always be the need for compassionate support for grieving families, and I hope that all Americans will take the time on October 15th to show their compassion for families that have experienced the loss of an infant or a child. I urge all of my colleagues to support this resolution, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield as much time as he may consume to my friend and a distinguished member of this House from the state of Iowa, Mr. Latham.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank the gentleman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, each year approximately 1 million pregnancies in the United States end in miscarriage, stillbirth, or the death of a newborn baby. Most Americans are not aware of this startling statistic because many of those affected grieve in silence, sometimes never coming to terms with their loss. We can help by giving all parents, grandparents, siblings, relatives, and friends a special day of remembrance. In addition, bringing attention to this issue will foster greater understanding in our communities of how to meet the needs of bereaved family members and focus attention on efforts to prevent pregnancy loss and newborn deaths. The governors of all 50 states have signed proclamations recognizing October 15th as Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day, and the legislatures of at least 8 states have passed resolutions recognizing this day each year on a permanent basis. Congress can bring even greater national awareness to this important issue by proclaiming its support for Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day. Taking this action will mean something special to millions of Americans that have been affected, especially the mothers. I commend the resolution's 54 bipartisan co-sponsors and the many citizens throughout the country and in my home state of Iowa whose efforts have made consideration of this resolution possible. Mr. Speaker, I urge all members to support the adoption of this resolution, which will offer the support to individuals and families who have lost a child through miscarriage, stillbirth, or other complications, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to yield 2 minutes to my colleague, again from Georgia, Dr. Gingrich.
Gentleman's recognized. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. And I too, want to thank Representative Latham for bringing this resolution to the floor and stressing the importance to make people understand that a million babies lost a year, in addition to probably another million or so that are aborted deliberately, is a lot of lost lives. And, Mr. Speaker, I think that the importance of this resolution is to let people know that when couples have a miscarriage, it's a child. It might be for some people, well, it's just a miscarriage. You know, they were only 6 weeks or they were only 9 weeks and they didn't even know what the baby, whether it was a boy or a girl. But in the minds of that couple, in many instances, it's their very first pregnancy, and they're already thinking about that little boy or the little girl and what the name's going to be and the clothes that they're going to pick out and the joys that they're going to have sending that child to school and raising it and seeing it play sports and become an adult someday and contribute to our great society. We tend to forget that, and this was brought home to me pretty vividly recently when my son and my daughter-in-law, she pregnant with their first child, found out at 10 weeks that the baby didn't have a heartbeat. So that baby was lost, and she went on, of course, and miscarried. And that loss will be with them forever. And so I think it's just so important for us all to realize that when you hear about somebody having a miscarriage, don't just think, well, it was just a miscarriage. It's not like losing a child or an older child, which, of course, I don't know that anything compares to that. But this is a significant loss, and that's why this resolution today is so important. I thank the gentleman for yielding. I thank Congressman Latham for bringing it forward, and Congressman Davis as well. And I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield 2 minutes to my distinguished colleague from the state of California, Mr. Bill Bray.
Gentleman's recognized. 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to thank Mr. Latham and both the majority and the minority for presenting this resolution today. I do not talk about a situation that occurred over 22 years ago in my family, but actually it was 22 years, 2 months ago. My wife and I lost our child at 3 months to crib death. And I'm sure you've got to believe that 22 years should be able to cover up the pain and the hurt and the scar, but it doesn't. And though we've been blessed with 5 healthy children, we'll always have that missing spot that little 3-month-old baby filled. But I want to thank you for today, and I stand up here today and speak of this matter to represent the men and women who have gone through what my family's gone through, and thank you for this. And if I may leave you with one message, more important than us grieving for our losses of those young ones that have died and are not here today, the best way for us to really remember them is to appreciate and worship and thank God for the blessing of having healthy children and babies that we can take care of, because they truly are the best memorial for our babies that we've lost, by preserving and protecting the treasures that God has given us in healthy children. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I want to urge all members to support the adoption of House Concurrent Resolution 222 as amended, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to House Concurrent Resolution 222 as amended? So many those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 of those voting having responded in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The concurrent resolution is agreed to. Without objection, the motion reconsider is laid upon the table.